When you travel today, skipping the sterile hotel corridor for the cozy charm of a private cabin feels like a massive upgrade. You get the authentic experience, a kitchen, and the peace of a quiet neighborhood. But that immediate sense of localized comfort masks a harsh physical reality. You are stepping into an environment where you are completely blind. You don't know the neighborhood's typical traffic patterns, you don't know the property's architectural blind spots, and you certainly don't know who else might have a copy of the key. The safety you feel sitting on a stranger's couch is an illusion. It relies entirely on physical boundaries, doors, windows, and locks that can be easily tested by anyone paying attention. To understand exactly how fragile this arrangement is, we need to look at 3 documented incidents where travelers found their boundaries tested. These cases show a terrifying progression of proximity: a threat assessing the perimeter, a threat attacking the walls, and a threat that is already inside. Because when you rent a stranger's home, you are paying to sleep inside an unvetted perimeter, and those physical boundaries offer absolutely zero guarantees. The first stage of escalation happens at the property line. A solo traveler, exhausted from a 5-hour drive for a job interview, checked into a quiet suburban rental to prep and sleep. Like any business traveler in an unfamiliar house, his primary focus was simply getting his bearings and getting some rest. At 11:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. When the renter cautiously looked out the front window, he saw a skinny man with his head down, holding a small brown paper bag. The man insisted, in a bleak, monotone voice, that he had a pizza delivery. The renter politely declined, explaining he had the wrong address, but the man calmly recited the rental's exact address back to him and gripped the screen door handle. Annoyed and unnerved, the renter slammed the door and yelled for the man to leave. Retreating to the window, he watched the stranger walk back to a beat-up red sedan with a busted headlight. But the car didn't leave. The stranger sat in the driveway with the engine running, shining a single high beam directly through the living room window into the dark house. After a tense, sleepless night, the renter gathered his things to leave at 4 a.m. As he reached the entryway, he made a chilling discovery. The front door was slightly ajar. In his rush to lock up the night before, he had fumbled with the unfamiliar screen door chain. The tension on the chain had prevented the main door from fully latching into the frame. The stalker didn't need to break in. He used a bizarre late-night interaction to force a panicked reaction, exploiting the traveler's unfamiliarity with the rental's hardware. Even a heavy deadbolt is useless if you don't know the quirks of the doorframe. If the perimeter is breached, the threat moves directly to the physical walls of the house. A family of 4 decided to take a short vacation to a beautiful, secluded rental, just a 5-minute walk from the ocean. It was entirely private. The first warning sign was easily dismissed. The morning after they arrived, the 8-year-old son came to breakfast in tears. He claimed he saw shadows moving in the backyard overnight. He said the figures came right up to the house, waved at him from the tree line, and even tapped on his window, warning him that if he screamed, his whole family would be hurt. The parents gave him the standard "ghosts aren't real" talk, but at 2:30 the next morning, the boy woke them up again. The parents rushed into the living room to find 3 men dressed in black hoodies and terrifying masks with bulging white eyes. They were violently testing the locked sliding glass door. One of them pulled out a knife, waving it at the terrified family, as the teenage daughter desperately dialed 911. Police arrived just in time to tackle one of the attackers, quickly apprehending the other 2 nearby. The terrifying truth emerged. These weren't random drifters. They were a local group of young men, aged 18 to 20, who specifically targeted tourist families, assuming they carried cash and were distracted by keeping their children entertained. The exact isolation that made the rental an idyllic getaway is exactly what made the family an easy target. The predators recognized the predictable patterns of vacationers, turning the rental's scenic glass walls into a highly visible, fragile point of failure. But what happens when the threat bypasses the perimeter and the walls entirely? The woman traveling for work sought some extreme isolation, booking a beautiful, secluded cabin nestled deep in the mountainous terrain of the Adirondacks. Almost immediately upon arriving, she was plagued by an intense feeling of being watched. Blaming it on city dweller anxiety, she tried to shake it off. By 10 p.m., her nerves were completely frayed. She walked the perimeter of the cabin, rigorously triple-checking every single exterior lock before heading upstairs to sleep. Wide awake at midnight, she decided to grab a cigarette. She walked downstairs, turned the corner toward the kitchen's sliding glass door, and stopped cold. Standing perfectly still in the shadows of the kitchen, clear as day, was a tall man with long, shaggy hair and a thick beard. After a horrifying 10-second standoff, the man lunged at her. She sprinted back up the stairs, locked herself in the bedroom, and called dispatch. While she hid in the closet, the man began violently hammering his fists against the bedroom door, screaming incoherently that he loved her and that he had changed. Officers arrived just as the man punched his hand completely through the splintered wood of the bedroom door. Once he was in custody, police contacted the owner and uncovered the reality of the situation. The attacker was the host's ex-fiancé. Following a bad breakup, he had secretly moved into one of the cabin's closets, living off beer and snacks for days before the renter ever arrived. He was armed with a knife from the kitchen. Her diligent safety routine had inadvertently created a deadly trap. By triple-checking the deadbolts, she hadn't kept the danger out. She had firmly locked herself inside with it. Standard safety rituals offer zero protection if the interior of the house was entirely compromised before you even set your bags down. Surviving a physical altercation is only the beginning. The victims of these invasions carry a permanent psychological scar, the total loss of baseline trust in their environment. The assumption of safety that most of us take for granted is completely shattered. The monsters in these spaces are entirely human. They are opportunistic predators who study the map, watch the driveways, and exploit the highly predictable behaviors and blind spots of short-term renters. The entire sharing economy functions on an unwritten social contract of mutual trust. We assume the host vetted the property, and we assume the previous guests handed back the keys. To a predator, that blind trust is simply an unlocked door. So the next time you step into a beautifully staged 5-star rental, remember that true safety takes more than reading reviews. You have to check the perimeter, you have to test the locks, and most importantly, you have to investigate the closets.